We're here to look at a common problem we might encounter when working with the schedule chart, also known as a Gantt chart in SAS Visual Analytics, and our workaround for the same. The workaround was designed by my colleague Renato. Really grateful to him for that. Let's take a look at this example. I create a new report, I add some data to this report. I import this data from a local file on my workstation. This is mock data, but the motivation came from some real life data which posed a problem when I tried to create a Gantt chart out of the same. So I import this data and add it to my report. So if you were to naively select the schedule chart, which comes along with SAS Visual Analytics, you'll notice that at first things seem pretty straightforward. You map your task name to the task parameter. You map a start date and end date to finish, and you can see the Gantt chart coming up on screen. You can also add a group if you wish. So as you can see, a Gantt chart does appear on screen. I can choose to probably filter by one factory or the other, and I see that there are certain tasks they do last between certain dates. Facility maintenance lasts between May to June. Supply chain review lasts between June to July, so on and so forth. So what's the problem, you might ask? The problem is you can sort the Gantt chart by the y-axis, which happens to be the task name, either ascending or descending. That's all very well. You just get them in alphabetical order. No real value add in doing that. You cannot, unfortunately, sort by the date, which would be really valuable and should be a basic expectation from any Gantt chart. The reason why you cannot sort by date is this is a compound parameter. It takes into account two object mappings that you carried out. The start date, which exists as one column, the end date, which exists as another column. So it makes sense that from a technical perspective, you really can't sort this axis on the basis of one date, because how will you sort it? Do you sort it by start or do you sort it by end? But the fact is, I really want it sorted. I don't want my final go-to-market activities coming up at the top of the screen and then I realize, oh, I needed to do certain other things earlier on in the process. So I want everything to flow nicely in terms of a sequence of activities. So what can I do? I can go back to my raw data, do a bit of manipulation and force fit the data to show up on the chart. But why would I want to go back all the way to my input data? That's where Renato came to the rescue. He gave me this idea. Why not create parameter? Why do we need to create a parameter? Well, we need some sort of a basis on which we need to create a sort. So what I do is I create something called the minimum ever date. It's a long name, but it's just for me to remember. Besides, we're not going to surface this on the chart. We're just going to use it. And I create it as a date variable. Click on edit as expression. And what I do here is I make use of an aggregated function minimum. I select the minimum of my start date. So I think slowly things will fall into place. Bear with me as I create this parameter first. What this means is that But I got factory 1, factory 2, factory 3, any variable on the basis of which I choose to group my data. I'm going to have a parameter value which gets the minimum of the start date for all those tasks. In short, this means for a particular group, the tasks that start first from a logical perspective, because factory managers do not just randomly assign dates. So the task that starts first from a logical perspective will have the lowest value in terms of a start date. I have populated this parameter and click on OK. Now this is not enough. What I need to do next is create a calculated item. I call this distance from the minimum start date. This calculated item basically says I've got a particular date. In my date item, you will notice I got a start date. I subtract the value of my parameter, the minimum ever date, and treat this as a numeric variable. Now do you see? May 2025 was my start date. My minimum ever date was the least of this value, and that's why I get a distance of 0. Distance between June 2025, it needs to be formatted better, but it's basically 1st June 2025 and 1st May 2025. You get a value of 31 days in May, you know the time, and all that is okay. So you create this calculated item, and guess what? That's not sufficient. We now create a fresh new calculated item. This calculated item is a portmanteau term that we create. Call this task sorted by start date. In fact, you can call it whatever you like, because I guarantee you I do not want to show this variable name on the chart, but I intend to use it. So what we need to do is we need to make use of a concatenate function. Variable, the calculated item we just created. What was this called? That was called distance from minimum start date. We concatenate this with some sort of a logical separating term. Maybe we use a hyphen, maybe we use an underscore. That really doesn't matter. Feel free to use whatever you like. And this is further concatenated with, you guessed it right, the actual factory task name. Not the factory name, the task name. That's what I meant. There is a slight modification you have to do. Note that this is a numeric field which has been derived from a date field. It needs to be converted to a string. So in Visual Analytics, in VA, it's best. I'm fully intended to use the best format. So what we see now is a combination of the concatenation of that distance variable with an underscore or a hyphen. In this case, I use a hyphen. You're free to use an underscore with the task name. So you got 0, then you got the next task. If it happens to be 2 days after, you got 2, and then followed by the task name, as you can see here on screen. So we have this variable now we have seen that we do get results for it. Let's go ahead and now add this, or rather replace the actual task name with this new calculated item. Did you just hear that sigh of relief and that silent prayer of thanks I just gave? You wouldn't have, but take it from me that I did feel that way. So now you see, I got exactly what I wanted. Factory 1, which seems to have been the early bird in this case, has started certain activities first. Facility maintenance, of course, they have to overhaul their equipments if they want to make something good. And then they did some optimization, supply chain review. Finally, they did something regarding quality control. You know, you got a good product when you spend the least amount of time on quality control. And finally, safety and compliance training and product development. They did the product at the end, all the way going down to inventory system. And keep in mind, this is mock data, so it might sometimes not make any sense, but yeah, right now what I wanted was a Gantt chart, a schedule chart that shows schedule in sequence, and that's what I get. So that's what I wanted. I'm so happy at getting my sequential Gantt chart. But I don't want to show the entire sausage factory for everybody to know my deep dark secrets. This doesn't look so nice. I mean, people will start questioning what is 92, what the hell is 61. That's where I will be a little smart and remove the axis label. I remove the tick values, and if someone wants to understand what exactly is this task, instead of the task sorted by task start date, I'm going to actually add the task name, and the task name comes first in the list. So it's very simple. I got this task, it's at factory 1, lasting from May till June. The actual variable that's on the y-axis is this calculated item I created, but I really don't want that. I choose to follow a design which basically does not show that particular value. I can even go a bit further and add a label, and this label could be my task name again. So this way I don't really lose anything by removing the y-axis, values. I actually have them right on top of the Gantt chart, right next to that particular timeline. So it's easy for me to understand what exactly is happening when. If I want, I can go further. I can add a filter for the factory location so that I see only one factory at a time. And as a final point, be smart about the title too. Remember to change it so that it doesn't show all those variable names, but something a little more basic and self-explanatory. So that's it. That's what I wanted finally. Not on this data, this is mock data, but I wanted it on some real life data. I got good results. I got what I wanted, which only goes to show sometimes in Visual Analytics, as in other software packages, you need to try and look at some ways to work around a problem rather than, like I would have definitely done 99% of the time, moan and groan over it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your patience.